Alrighty, so here we go, boys and girls. We have finally made it to the final moving forward series episode of the 2023 season. And just like what happened in 2020 in the COVID shortened season, finished the moving forward series talking about the defending MLS Cup champion and now the three time MLS Cup champion that is the Columbus Crew, who, of course, won their third title just a couple of months ago after beating LAFC 2-0. Now, in terms of their season, they finished with 16-9-9 record and finished with 57 points. They scored 67 goals this season, and we talk about how Columbus, if you want to talk about probably the most entertaining team to watch this season, it's got to be Columbus. I mean, the style that Wilfred Nancy basically run, that kind of high octane kind of style of play that we saw throughout the season, it's not a big surprise. The fact that they scored tons of goal, and not to mention that they have a lot of good attacking talent up front. Also, another reason why they've scored the most goal in the league. But unfortunately, as we talked about before with Fernandes' system, as much as it's very fun to see his team bomb up field and commit man forward to score those goals, they also are deceptive in terms of their defense. And we talked about that was being one of the biggest weakness for this Columbus team. Although as the season goes along, it feels like they started to fix that and even though they conceded 46 goals this season, which is actually among the most out of all the teams that is in the Eastern Conference. I think only Atlanta didn't concede more goal than what Columbus is. That was kind of by design because of how much that they were committing so many men forward, and that, as I mentioned before, many teams have tried the formula in terms of trying to go on the break uh, and hit Columbus on the counter when they're a little bit short on the back, and unfortunately, it just didn't quite work out so well. Even though that's the formula to do so, but in terms of goal differential, it's plus 21, which is one of the best in the league. If not, I think that's the best in the league because I think even the team that won the Supporter Shield, FC Cincinnati, did not had as good of a goal differential as the Columbus Crew has. Now they finished third in the Eastern Conference, which is kind of interesting because that's the same place that they won MLS Cup back in 2020. I mean, they in that COVID shortened season, they were able to win MLS Cup after finishing in third place. But unlike that run, I would say that this one is kind of even more impressive because one, there's fans in the stands for that, and that I can understand why people will say that they put that MLS Cup as an asterisk because it's a shortened season. Though I will also argue to you that that one is equally as impressive, if not maybe even more impressive than what we saw in terms of this year because of so much chaotic kind of thing happened in that COVID shortened season, and especially that was the one where they were heavy underdogs against Seattle at home because of how much they have a lot of players that is on the COVID protocol list. But then a certain guy called Lucas Arian and Aiden Morris basically rise to the ashes and guide the team. And as we talk about later, it seems like the torch has been passed between Lucas Arian and passed it to Kuto as that next big star player for this Columbus Crew attack. Now, as I mentioned, they finished third in the Eastern Conference and they won MLS Cup 2023 after beating LAFC at home with a 2-0 win. In terms of head coach, it's Wilfred Nancy. He's been with the club since last year, and what's kind of interesting is the fact that this is the second year in a row where we see the MLS Cup team that is won by a coach that is in his first year. So actually, let me rephrase that. This is also the second consecutive year that we've seen a first year head coach won an MLS Cup. So that maybe give a lot of hope for all these teams that are currently on first year head coach, and we have a lot of teams that are under first year head coach, that there's a chance we might see a repeat again where a head coach that is coming into to a team and they're going to have immediately success and guide them to an MLS Cup. And this also kind of proves to you why the head coach turnover is at an all-time high in MLS. I mean, you can see a lot of teams are looking to try to get the right head coach so that they can get success right away. And while that could be the case at some point, it doesn't always work like that. And the fact that I kind of am also surprised the fact that sometimes when you see these teams win MLS Cup, I would think that they would be under a head coach that's been there for a while to kind of build the philosophy of the team and guide them to success. But that hasn't been the case. I mean, it feels like the goal to win MLS Cup is really getting a new voice in there and quickly buy into the philosophy, and then you can potentially win MLS Cup. And that's exactly what this Columbus Crew is. They clearly have bought into the Wilfred Nancy philosophy, which was a very good philosophy and good tactics, consider how he was able to guide a Montreal team the second in the standings in 2022, and he did even one better in this one of winning MLS Cup. Now, in terms of chief soccer officer is Tim Bezbatchenko. He's been there since 2020, and I can guarantee you that Columbus fans, not only they're happy of what Tim Bezbatchenko has done to this team and building the core of this team, but it has to feel so nice that they're free of the crutches of Anthony Precog. I mean, he is a guy that, as I mentioned, the most hated man right now in Columbus, and that I think that's also kind of the reason why we haven't seen an Austin FC versus Columbus game at Lower.com Field, because I can guarantee you that there's going to be a lot of hate between both of those teams if this game is taking place at Lower.com Field. But still, with the new regime coming in and Tim Bezbatchenko coming in as the new chief soccer officer, he has really turned this team around and built a really good roster that was able to guide this team to MLS Cup in 4 years. I mean, people don't know it, but this team has won two MLS Cup in just this four years. And well, I'm not going to use the D word just yet, because if you want to consider yourself a dynasty, you need to maybe win another MLS Cup in a short amount of period. But they're getting close in terms of if they can do so in this next year or even in this next season or two. Now, in terms of top goal scorer, you got Cucho Hernandez with 16 goals, followed by Lucas Arian with 10 goals. And even though Lucas Arian was long gone with this team, as I mentioned, it feels like the torch was passed in the middle of the season when I think it was kind of a surprise the fact that they decided to sell Zarian. I mean, I know no there was a good offer from Saudi Arabia to trying to get Lucas Arian away from Columbus, and Columbus kind of feel like the offer was too good to say no. But still, you just lost your most important number 10 in this team, and there was a lot of question of, well, yeah, you got the money, but can you have anybody on this attack that can step up and take that role? And who would have thought that? We knew Cucho Hernandez was very good. I mean, he set the league on fire when he came into the league, but I don't think anyone would have imagined what he did in his second season. Um, not only being even better than what he is in the first season, but really just kind of took over the Lucas Arian role, and that this is also where said before how it feels like the torch was passed in the middle of the season, where it's now Cucho team, and he's the one that runs the show on the attack this season. But that's also not to say that he has some good supporting cast too. I mean, Christian Ramirez. This is gonna hurt as a Minnesota United fan because of how he's done this season with Columbus. I mean, Superman is always well loved in the Loons fan base, but it's kind of bittersweet to see him win an MLS Cup and not in the black and blue instead of the black and gold, and that this also kind of just shows you the fact that I know eventually Minnesota has got a good number 9 in Timu Puki. But man, I wish they brought back Christian Ramirez. I think every Loons fan can admit to say that they want Christian Ramirez back in this team, and that to this day, and I'm gonna say this forever, it was a huge mistake for them to let go of Christian Ramirez back in 2019. One mistake that has really haunted the team in terms of that number nine spot for many years until this recent year when Timu Puki really broke out. But then you got Aiden Morris with 4 goals, Jason Russell Rowe with 4 goals, and a bunch of players that, again, guys that you might not heard a lot about, but they really stepped up and this kind of just also shows you why Columbus won MLS Cup. When you want to win MLS Cup, you need to have a good supporter cast, and that's exactly what this Columbus Crew team. I mean, it's not just about Cucho and Diego Rossi as the fake names there, but you also have a good supporting cast in Christian Ramirez coming up clutch many times before in the playoffs, and even Alexander Matan just having a career season too. Speaking of Matan, he and Cucho ties in terms of the top assist leader with 11 assists, followed by Aiden Morris with 7 assists, Lucas Arian with 7 assists, and Mo Farsi also with 7 assists for this team. So yeah, anytime when you finish as the top goal scoring team, you know that you're gonna have guys that's gonna get a ton of assists in terms of the top five. But when you look at the last five seasons for Columbus, this is actually the most successful season that they had in the last 5 years, and that includes that MLS Cup run that they have in 2020, because I think when you look at points per game average, I think this season they had even better than what they did in 2020. But in this season, they finished with 69-9 record and finished with 57 points. In 2022, yeah, it was a disastrous season. That was the season where, it was the last year of Caleb Porter, and that was the year where they kind of reincarnated the Portland Timbers back in 2020. And if you're a Timbers fan watching this, I apologize that I have to mention that, but you knew that was coming with the way that just like the Timbers in 2020, the Columbus Crew cannot stop giving points away in the final 15 minutes. Like they were on a record pace in terms of the most points gave up in the last 15 minutes, and even in the 90th minute too. They were conceding goals so many times in the 90th minute where it was almost predictable the fact that they were going to lose the lead heading into the last 15 minutes. And I think the cream on the top was really what we saw in that decision day game against Orlando City. Looked like they were on their way to make it to the playoffs, only to once again blow another lead, and just kind of almost a microcosm of the season that Columbus had, and also is what resort Caleb Porter to eventually getting sent to the unemployment line. But in 2021, they did finish with 13-8-13 record with 47 points. Again, this was a season where they definitely had that MLS Cup hangover, which is something that I'm pretty sure Columbus fans hope that that's not going to be the case heading into 2020. 24, and I don't think that is going to be the case when you look at how good the roster there is that this team has. But in 2020, they finished with 12-5-6 record and finished with 41 points. That was the year, like I said, also so them winning MLS Cup. And then in 2019, they finished with 10-8-16 record and finished with 38 points. And this was back when this team was there was a lot of question of, is this team going to actually move to Austin because of the whole Anthony pre-card kind of situation. And in terms of the average attendance, 20,314, good for 14th in the league. Most of the games this season at lower.com feel is a sellout, and this is a good example of what happened when you see a movement that we saw just before the COVID time, where the Anthony pre out kind of movement was at its full forces, to a point where it actually did force Anthony Precourt to sell the team and eventually keep Columbus uh or keep the crew in Columbus. And not to mention, when you finally have a new ownership, and that they finally hit the wish that a lot of Columbus Crew fans been wanted, which is a downtown stadium like what we see with lower.com field, it's not a big surprise. The attendance have gone up, and also not a big surprise to see the attendance go up. Consider this has been a winning team ever since they not only were able to keep the crew in Columbus, but also getting a new ownership, and a new ownership that believe in winning compared to the previous ownership, and the previous owner that is considered to be one of the most hated owner in MLS. I wouldn't say he's the most hated owner, because I can tell you that there are definitely some owners in MLS that is even more hated than Anthony Precourt, John Fisher, Stan Kroenke. Keep him in mind. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that if one day when we do see the Columbus Crew play against Austin FC at lower.com field, man, there's gonna be some bloodbath that's gonna happen in that game. Now, in terms of MVP of this team, it's gotta be Cucho Hernandez. I mean, I could easily gone with a couple of supporter cast, but this team is really Cucho Hernandez team, and that he showed not only in the goal scoring chart, but also on the assist chart. He's kind of the main man that what we saw Lucas Arian was to this Columbus Crew team before he departed this team in the middle of the season. And in terms of disappointment, I mean, I shouldn't even put disappointment in there. I mean, whenever you win MLS Cup, you can't really say that there are any players kind of had a disappointing season. And really, there wasn't any player that I can say that had a disappointing season. All the players on this roster kind of play not only above their standards, but definitely well above their expectation. I mean, if I had to pick a disappointment, I'll probably say maybe Eloy Rome, but that's kind of nitpicking, mainly because Eloy Rome suffering injury, and here comes Patrick Schultz to go over the job, and he never looked back ever since picking up some consistent uh performance during his time covering for Eloy Rome, and eventually kind of force out Eloy Rome out of this Columbus Crew team. Speaking of Patrick Schulte, I'm going to give him the young player to watch. I mean, there's a lot of young players on this Columbus Crew team that you should watch out for, and especially, one thing about the Columbus Crew and something that I don't think people notice, this team does have a really good second team. I mean, their second team, I think previous to this year they won MLS Next Pro. Or actually, did they win this year, or was it this season that they won MLS Next Pro? Either way, I know they made it to MLS Next Pro 2 years in a row, and that just kind of shows you that they have a lot of talent in their farm system. And the Crew Academy is not one of the academy that you would expect to produce some good talent, but you have Patrick Schulte, a guy that was the goalkeeper of the year in 2022 in the MLS Next Pro. Kind of came out of nowhere after covering for Eloy Roman. While he definitely had his shaky moment in the beginning time, he just got better and better as the season goes along to a point where he got a call up for the U.S. men's national team uh, this January. And I know it is the January cupcake camp, but still, it's got to be a dream come true for Patrick Schulte. How this was a guy that was playing in the MLS Next Pro, and this is another example to show you that the MLS Next Pro can actually produce some good talent in the league and could actually produce talent that eventually could be a key part in terms of the goalkeeping spot to win you an MLS Cup. Now, in terms of road to MLS Cup, oh, by the way, in terms of shout out, in terms of the young player to watch, I mean, you got to give shout out to Aiden Morris. I could have easily picked Aiden Morris again because he is by far the most talented the youngster on this team that could potentially sold off for a big amount of money. I could have even gone with Mo Farsi, even though he's kind of on the older side. And don't forget about Jason Russell Rowe again, a guy that, really tear up MLS Next Pro in 2022. And even though he didn't really play as much impact as what we see with Patrick Schultz he did with the Crew, he's still a guy that could be a good player for the Crew team and a player that I'm pretty sure Toronto is really regretting of letting him go just a couple years ago. Now, in terms of their road to MLS Cup, this is where it gets different. I'm not going to go with what went right and what went wrong, but instead talk about the road to MLS Cup. Now, in the first round, they had to face a bit of a battle against Atlanta United because I mentioned that was for what I consider to be the most exciting series out of all of them. I had a feeling there was going to be tons of goal that was scored, and I was not disappointed. Well, at least when you look at game one was kind of a bit of a letdown because it was a one-way traffic for Columbus. I mean, it was a letdown in terms of neutral. If you're a Columbus fan, you'd love to see what we saw in game one, where they absolutely dominate Atlanta United and won 2-0 in that one. Not so much in game two, though. Now, game two, Atlanta kind of woke up. They won 4-2 against Columbus, but then in game three, it was almost kind of the carbon copy, except this time it's Columbus, the one that gets the 4-2 victory at home to move on into the second round. Now, in the second round, they had to face against a really tough team that is Orlando City, that looked like they were a team that was destined to make MLS Cup, but they shut them out and won 2-0 on the road. And then to make it even more impressive, now they have to face again the Supporters Shield champion and their most hated rival, that is FC Cincinnati in the Hell is Real Derby. And I mentioned before how that's that game is definitely going to go down as one of the best conference final that we have seen before. I mean, there's just always something about rivalries in conference final games that there's a lot of stake. I mean, we saw in the Canadian Classic back in 2016 that is to this day probably will go down as the greatest conference final we've ever seen between two teams, and this one lived up to that hype too. I mean, they were down 2-0. It looked like their season was done. They scored 2 goals late and just kind of completely flipped the script and won 3-2 on the road in that one. And then in MLS Cup 2023, they face against an LAFC team that, while the LAFC had played a lot of games and that Columbus was actually favorites coming into this one, they still, this is LAFC, and this is a team that know how it gets it done in terms of MLS Cup last year. Didn't quite happen as they won 2-0 thing, or at least Columbus won 2-0 that one to win their second MLS Cup in 4 years. Now, moving forward, looking at this Columbus Crew team, so obviously, most of the teams that they have that won MLS Cup is going to be be back heading into next season. But one notable player is out of this team is Julian Gressel. He's now with Inter Miami, but that's okay because they just bought in Hannes Souza from Pachuca, and he's a guy that is a big name in terms of a player that can do very well in this league. I mean, he done very well with Pachuca during his time with Liga MX, and I think this would be a perfect replacement for Julian Grasso. Although I wouldn't mind if they give Mo Farsi more minutes heading into this upcoming season because Mo Farsi really breaked out in that playoffs, and it was kind of unexpected too because he was covering Julian Grasso that was dealing with injuries, and that not only that worked out well, but he kind of won the spot for the rest of the playoffs, and Julian Gressel didn't really kind of break in to the starting 11 as a result of it. They have a DP spot open, so it is crazy to say, as talented as this Columbus Crew team is, they have a DP spot open mainly because they got Nagby to not only sign a contract extension, but also was able to complete a restructure that we talk about contracts in the league and how they're some of the worst contract in the league. I gotta say, Darlington Nagbe might have one of the best, if not the best, contract in the league. A guy that is just kind of an ageless wonder, and a guy that wherever he goes, he is gonna be a champion. I mean, it's hard to believe he's now won 4 MLS Cup, with free different team right now, and don't count out the fact that he's going to win a fifth one, especially with the friendly contract extension that, of course, he got. So yeah, again, the fact that they're able to open the DP spot on that, and they can spend that DP spot into adding more talent. I mean, the old as the old saying goes, the rich can get richer for this Columbus Crew team heading into this off season. And then, of course, as I mentioned, it feels like they're running it back. Like pretty much all of the players from the MLS Cup roster is coming back in terms of this season. And then of course the next thing is the fact that they're back in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They favorites of potentially winning this, and I know obviously we probably know who is the favorites in terms of winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup. It's that team in pink down in South Florida that just has the greatest player of all time playing there. But if we really want to get serious about this, when you look at all these teams that's heading to the CONCACAF Champions Cup this season, and there's a lot of MLS team to do so, 10 of them to be exact. You gotta say Columbus is probably right up there to probably be one of the favorites and one of the team that could actually win the CONCACAF Champions Cup because again, when you look at this roster, it's a really good roster, but it's also a very deep roster too. They're pretty much too deep in every single position, and this is also where it can pretty much them up really well heading into next season too, where because they're too deep in every position, because they're going to play a lot of games like what we saw with LAFC did last season. They might not suffer a bit of a drop off as what we seen in the past, where teams kind of have to sacrifice in terms of which games that they're going to focus and which game they're not because of the fixture congestion. And then lastly, well, actually second to last is that will they be tempted to accept offer from Europe for their young players as soon as the summer transfer window? They have a lot of good young talent on this team that could be sold off to Europe. And while right now they have pretty much resist that temptation in the winter in terms of selling their young talented player, will they do so again in the summer or maybe heading into next off season if of all these youngsters once again had a great season and potentially them repeat as MLS Cup champion, which perfectly leads to my last point of the fact that can they repeat. Now, normally I would say that when you look at this team and with how good this team is and that they're pretty much too deep as I mentioned in every position, they have a good shot in terms of repeat. However, I do think that it's going to be tough for this team to repeat, and that when you look at the Eastern Conference, and I will say that if Columbus was in the Western Conference, that question is probably going to be yes for me when it comes to repeat because the Western Conference I think heading into this season is once again going to be the more weaker conference compared to the East, but unfortunately, the Columbus Crew is in the Eastern Conference, and as I mentioned before, I feel like this upcoming season it's going to be a bloodbath again in terms of who's going to be the best. There's going to be a ton of team in the Eastern Conference that's going to be good again and are reloaded to have a run for MLS Cup. I mean, I've even mentioned it multiple times this season too of how many teams that are good in the Eastern Conference, and that Columbus has to feel proud of themselves that they're able to get out of that bloodbath and stand atop of it. But for a fact that it's going to be tough to try to go through that bloodbath again, heading into the second consecutive year of them repeating champion. And again, despite the fact that we have seen teams that have repeat in terms of their conference champion, we have not seen a team that has repeated since the Galaxy did it back in 11 and 12. And there's a reason why we haven't seen a repeat champion for a long time, because it's so hard to repeat. I mean, just to get back to the MLS Cup is an impressive feat enough. And this is why I said in the last episode, LAFC, them getting back into MLS Cup is just incredible. But, for this Columbus Crew team, yes, they have the talent to do so. But can they go through that gauntlet again like they did this year and emerge as the team that represent the East and emerge at the top of the mountain? Yeah, that's a big unknown, especially of how good the Eastern Conference is. And I'm gonna say, I know Crew fans don't like to hear this, but I think no. I do think that there's gonna be a different champion this year. And that's not to say that Columbus won't win any trophies. I think they're gonna at least win one trophy next season. Probably not MLS Cup with the way that, again, the Eastern Conference is gonna be loaded again, and that I'm pretty sure now Columbus has a lot of target at the back, in terms of the fact that every team wants to get to that top again, and every team wants to to win the Eastern Conference, knowing that I feel like next year it's going to be the kind of the same thing as what we saw last year, where it feels like whoever wins the East next season is probably going to be crowned as MLS Cup champ, because of how good the East is, and that there's definitely started to become once again a big gap between the East and the West, as what we have seen before in MLS before. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of looking at this moving forward series episode, and that's also it in terms of this season, looking at all 29 teams in the moving for series. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and let me know in the comments below if you're a Columbus Crew fan. What do you think of this season and moving forward? Can they repeat? Can they get through this bloodbath of the Eastern Conference again and win MLS Cup, or even win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, or win a cup competition again with this team? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys to like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.